In this video we have another first aid type task, but this one is really more for your leadership. It is establishing a casualty collection point or a CCP. The primary people involved in this are your medic and your senior most non-commissioned officer. So if this is a platoon operation, your platoon sergeant. If it's company, it is your company first sergeant. Now there is always the possibility that you're going to require more than one casualty collection point. Well, then the senior most non-commissioned officer in that particular area is the one that is in charge of the casualty collection point. Responsibilities: the medic recommends where the site should be on the ground. They also triage the wounded and take care of the wounded. The platoon sergeant, the first sergeant, selects the specific location and is responsible for establishing security for the casualty collection point. Now, as much as possible, the security should be provided by the wounded. So the ones that are the least wounded, that are still able to fight, still able to help out, they should be helping with security. But don't forget that they're going to have to get evacuated also. That platoon sergeant or first sergeant also keeps track of the wounded for reporting so that everyone is accounted for. He also maintains and accounts for the casualty's equipment and belongings. Ideally, everything goes with the casualty when they get evacuated, but some things might have to be left behind. Examples would be, for an engineer, a bag of explosives, their demo kit. For an infantryman, or anyone really, if that wounded person had a squad automatic weapon or a general purpose machine gun, those items are going to be more needed by their squad and their platoon than by the wounded person. So that is taken away by the non-commissioned officer, either the platoon sergeant at the CCP or the squad leader up on the point where that person was wounded. The platoon sergeant would also be in charge of any aid and litter teams that are at the casualty collection point. They're assigned to that point, not necessarily the ones that are coming off of the objective. Those are assigned up on the objective with that particular squad. You might have a few that are assigned specifically to the casualty collection point. That platoon sergeant is going to tell them where to go to check for wounded or where to assist with evacuating the wounded. Now, I have some criteria here for establishing a CCP. I got this from something called the Ranger Medic Handbook. The CCP should be reasonably close to the fight. It should be near templated areas of expected high casualties, where you anticipate the fighting is going to be the worst. The CCP should provide cover and concealment to protect the medic and the casualties from further injury. Ideally, it should be inside a building or on hard stand, so you don't want it on wet, marshy ground. It should have easy access to evacuation routes. It should be in close proximity to lines of drift on the objective. The battle's going to shift back and forth. The casualty collection point should be close to where most of the fighting's going to be, where it's going to be moving back and forth on. It should be adjacent to objective choke points, such as breaches into the enemy perimeter. It should avoid natural or enemy choke points. These are areas that are going to be magnets for enemy fire. The area should allow passive security. Examples: you're in a defensive fight, your CCP should be inside your perimeter, not outside. You want that barrier between the enemy and the casualty collection point for that additional security. The CCP should have good drainage. You don't want to locate your CCP inside a swamp or in a marsh. It should have easy trafficability to the evac assets, and also easy trafficability for your aid and litter teams bringing the wounded off of the objective. And it should be expandable as needed. You may be anticipating only 3 or 4 casualties. You could end up with 3 times, maybe 5 times that number of casualties. The area you picked for a casualty collection point should be able to hold that. Now, we'll move down here. We are on the assault. We are attacking an enemy position. We have over here a support by fire element, which is located on a rise. Our assault element is located in a tree line off on the other side. Now we anticipate the bulk of the casualties are going to come from the assault element. So our casualty collection point is going to be closer to that than our support by fire. But you have to realize you're probably going to have some casualties from over here too. So you're going to want them to be able to access that casualty collection point easily. The site we selected offers pretty good cover and concealment. It's out of observation of the enemy. It could be in a bit of a dip in the ground. Maybe it's located inside a little dry drainage area that we found in here. There's no water flowing through it right now. It's dry. It'll provide us cover. Now, your casualty collection point, when the casualties come in, you should have one particular area where the new casualties come to. And then that's the location where the medic will go and triage the casualties. For triaging, they're determining how bad the person is wounded. The categories for a casualty are urgent, priority, routine, and minimal. You can also add expectant in there also. Your expectant is the ones who are not going to survive to be evacuated, or it's extremely likely that they will die en route. It's hard to say this, but do not waste your assets on the expectants. Make them comfortable, but don't give them too many of your supplies that are more needed by the people that will live. Now, I have been told in the past that the categories were kind of time-based. The ones that fell in the urgent category were expected to die, if I remember correctly, within 2 hours if they did not receive higher level medical care. Where your minimals, it was something like 24 hours. And then your priority and your routine are in between those two. I think priority, it was they had to be evacuated within 4 hours, I think. And the routine, I think, was like 10 to 12. Now, should make a note here, those that are expected to die and those that already have died must be kept away from the rest of the wounded. This is a psychological thing. Casualties need to have the expectation that they are going to live. If they have that expectation, they probably will live. If they believe they're going to die, guess what? They probably are, no matter how minor their injury is. That just happens. You can have a person who's been hit. They've been shot, but the injury isn't all that bad, and they die within an extremely short period of time because they thought they were going to. They thought they were goners. Now, there is a color code system that is used. For during the daytime, you can use tags, paper tags, or potentially markers on the forehead, if that's what you got. For nighttime, you use chemical lights. Your urgent is supposed to be red, green as priority, blue as routine, and then minimals, you don't give them a color. Your expectants, if it's during the daytime and you tag them, the tag is supposed to be black. Now for evacuation, we've already triaged them. We're setting them up for loadout for evac on an ambulance, on a helicopter, on an Accio sled, on a horse-drawn carriage, whatever we have available. The higher priority casualties get moved to the closest to the load-up point. So we have our urgents, which are right next to the loadout point. Off to the side of them or right behind them, we will have our priorities. And then behind them or off on the side, separated from these guys, will be your routines and your minimals. But as I said, your minimals should be assisting with providing security of the casualty collection point. Now, when you are loading up your casualties, load them up in a way where the more serious cases are the first ones off once they get to that hospital or that medical facility. So if you have mixed going on there between priorities and urgent, the first ones that'll get loaded up onto the ambulance that'll be farther back will be your priorities, and your urgents will be loaded last because they will be the first ones that will come off once they get to that hospital. That is the basics on it. One note here, because I've had this problem over the years. The medics should pull out the minimal amount of stuff and get it ready on the ground as is needed. How much? I'd say really only enough for 1 or 2 casualties. I have had medics that literally would empty out their medic bag at a casualty collection point. They would have everything divided up in equal piles all around the casualty collection point, the IVs hanging from trees or hanging from straps or pieces of 550 cord inside the backs of vehicles. Not recommended, because what's going to happen if your casualty collection point starts taking fire and you have to get out of there quickly? Ideally, you just grab the wounded, you grab the medic bag, and you get the hell out of there as fast as possible. You don't want to be in a situation where you grab an empty medic bag and you're going to have to take all that stuff's on the ground, toss it into the bag while you're under enemy fire to get out of the area, to get out of the path of incoming fires. So medics, load your bags with the more critical life-saving stuff, the more needed used stuff towards the top, towards the outside where it's faster to get to. Stuff you're not going to use as often or is really minimal for needed for keeping someone alive should be farther inside your bag. Move from casualty to casualty with your medic bag, pulling out what you need to take care of that medic. I realize it's quicker if you already have it out, setting out. But consider the possibility that you're going to take enemy fire also. And do you really want to spend that extra 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or minutes loading that stuff back up into the bag under enemy fire so that you can get out of there? So keep that in mind. I actually got into some pretty good arguments with some medics over the years on that. I had one medic who was a EMT before he joined the military, and his excuse was, well, this is the way we set it up in the ambulance. And my response back was, well, guess what? You're not in an ambulance. You're in an area where the enemy can kill you just as easily as they almost killed your casualty that's being brought in. Put your stuff away. He didn't like that. And he also didn't listen. And went and complained to the company first sergeant about it. Now for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.